Okay, shalom. It's a Holocaust Day, starting very, very soon. And I think it's the first time I'm trying to give it as a lecture in English. You know, when we are in Auschwitz and we talk about the phenomena of the Holocaust, it's different because everything is so, you can sight and see the things, and then even when my English can't express what I'm trying to say, the place gives the full picture. But still, I'll give the background of this lecture. My teacher for philosophy was the head of philosophy school in Tel Aviv University, 1996. On the main newspaper in Israel, on the weekends, there is an article about me on the first page. And when I come Sunday to the university, in a quite arrogant attitude, I want to get comments, and I go next to the office of the dean of philosophy school. Wait. And a minute after, the secretary calls me and says, Professor Ben Shlomo wants to see you. I go into his office. He holds a newspaper, looks at me and says, your name is Erez Eshel? I said, yes. You are interviewed there? I say, yes. You are quoted there by saying that since the Holocaust, the worst thing that happened to the Jews is the assassination of the Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. I say, more or less, yes. So he said, I always wanted to see a stupid student for philosophy leave my office. Imagine my face, it becomes red. Say, excuse me, professor? He says, are you quoted there? I said, yes. And you more or less said what I'm quoting? He said, yes. So you are stupid, leave my office. I wait outside the office until the evening. In the evening, I try to approach him. He says, I do not speak with stupid students. And I'm missing my taxi. I said, I went to your taxi driver and told him that you left before. So I'm the only one to take you home. And now I'm driving you home and you are trapped with me and we are going to discuss. And we started having endless discussions about the Holocaust. And then I understood how stupid I am to compare anything in the history of humankind to what happened in the history, in the Holocaust. But then I had a very clear question to him, Ben Shlomo, why don't you lecture about the Holocaust? Because we are so ignorant about it. And he said, because I'm a philosopher teacher. And every philosophy, Western philosophy, is a footnote for what Plato and Aristotle had written. And they spoke about the ideal of good that was never seen. But the evil, the Satan, was seen by the Germans in the Holocaust. And if I will teach about the Holocaust, I will have to stop teaching philosophy because the philosophy simply, it simply collapses when you beat this phenomena. When he left the university and went to be part of the staff of the Academies for Leadership, and I can see Tomer Dror is still a generation that had the privilege to study directly from him. He would agree to teach about the Holocaust only in a seminar of minimum 3 days, because he said you can't really deal with the Holocaust. You have to go around and around and repeat yourself again and again. And then the only thing, when you really face the phenomena of the Holocaust, you get silent. And this phenomena had happened to us Jews. One of the main students of Ben Shlomo, Professor Shalom Rosenberg, used to say, the pure evilness had seen the Jews as their main enemy. And the Jew has to ask himself again and again, what makes us the enemy of evilness? And this evilness was done by the Germans. Part of escaping, we say Nazis. Only 36% of the Germans were part of the party, of the Nazi party. But more than 90% of the Germans had to participate and had been part of this evilness. So what do we try to figure out now is the uniqueness of the Holocaust in humanity. It's a phenomena we understand on scientists, phenomena we understand on certain basketball players. The moment you meet a phenomena, it defines everything. Sometimes you can be hiking and you see a kind of a view that from that moment, any view you will see will be compared to that view. In the Jewish tradition, we have a blessing for a certain beauty of a woman. One time in your life, you can give this blessing. Adorno said, writing poetry after Auschwitz is a barbarian act. There wasn't even one philosopher that defined and said you stop writing poetry, because poetry in some way is the way to express things. The Holocaust defines event in human history that has no other thing to compare it. It breaks the idea of philosophy, of religion, and arts. Some philosophers would say that all of the Western culture has to be restarted after the Holocaust. Some theologians will claim that principle of religious must be rebuilt and new ideas, because we had met the pure evilness of Satan. Again, these expressions went after other evil things that had happened in the past. כן. חולצה לבן, ג'ינס, מכנסיים ארוכות יפה. אבל אני צריכה גם חולצה לבנה. או שמלה, תלבשי, אבל להיות לבוש יפה ומכובד מאוד. My daughter, now all of my family is going to meet. There is a kind of we call it where Holocaust survivors meet in the living room or with young people. And all of my kids are going now to meet. There is an event with my father. My father is a Holocaust survivor. Him and his brother were saved in the Holocaust because they were hidden in Paris. Again, an argument that occurred in Vienna. He used to live in Vienna, and the sisters of my grandmother came and made a big argument. They saw what's going on in Germany and said, we have to escape. And my grandfather couldn't accept the idea that a Holocaust or something so evil can happen. In the end, he agreed to transfer to Paris, and the Germans had got him in Paris, and he was murdered when he was 32. He got an injection. Two were holding him, and the theater actress had injected fluid into his chest. That's the way he was murdered. And again, me as a teacher, and in the end, I still serve as a reserve soldier, is because my main mission in life was that a Jew will never raise his hands above his head. And to learn about the Holocaust now in these days, after 7th of October, when we see in every university in the world where they chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. 2,000 years they said Jews go to Palestine. Now they say Jews go out of Palestine. Where you don't find any historian, non-Jewish, that will dare from any university to say it's unacceptable. Again, everything cracks again. Differently from the Holocaust, where we didn't have a state and we didn't have the historian perspective, now we have it. And when we, on the next 24 hours, are focusing to understand what happened then, we understand that something else is demanded and we can't be any more naive. There are 5 principles that Ben Shlomo used to teach us about the phenomena of the Holocaust. And each one of the principles stands on its own. And it's not because of the number of Jews that were murdered, because Stalin had murdered much more people, 20 million. Hutu had murdered 50 million. It's about something else that breaks the idea of humanity. The main sin that the Jew was murdered in the Holocaust, it's because he was born. The idea of totalitarian murder of the Jews, it is expressed by Juden rein. The world is clean from Jews. Rein is clean. No more Jews. Only in Israel we have sometimes flies and mosquitoes and rats. And sometimes you kill the flies and you say, I hope all of the flies will be dead, to kill all of the mosquitoes. A rat or a mouse in your house, kill all of the mice in the world. No one ever in the history tried to clear the world from mice or from flies or from any other creature. If anyone would try such a thing, the world will stop him. When we see the map of the planning of murdering the Jews, many times we are shocked by the big numbers. 200,000 Jews here, 600 here, 1.5 million in Poland, 1.8 million Jews in Ukraine. But the real thing is to look at the little small numbers. About 7 Jews in a city in Norway. About 1 Jew that was hiding he wasn't even hiding, on an island in Greece, and 200 Nazis were running after him. When we read the book about the diaries of
Anne Frank,
Anna Frank, the way they were chasing from house to house to find her. If they would find my father as a baby and his brother, he would never ever leave the home. You know, when we read the research on the way they killed the Jews in the trucks, poisoning them with the gas, Friedler teaches us that every time there were few kids, babies that lasted and didn't die because their mother had put a wet cloth on their face and the gas didn't get to them. And afterwards, when the truck was unloaded and they saw the babies crying, in a normal world, someone would adopt even one of the kids. They would hold the child on his leg and crush his mind on the wall. They looked for the last 2. Again, you know, the Hutu were murdering the Tutsi. The Turks were murdering the Armenians. Serbians were murdered. But when the Turks were murdering the Armenians, it was in a certain place that there was a conflict. On that time, there was the Armenian court in Israel. The Turks were controlling it. They didn't murder the Armenian there. They didn't chase an Armenian from one house to another to look for him, because it was a conflict of politics. They didn't want to murder the last Tutsi. Judenrein, the first time in the history that there is the idea and there was a planning to kill the last Jew in the world. And that's the reason they gave the numbers. The world that is clean from Jews. First phenomena. Second phenomena. We call it that no one stood up. Everyone knows about Wannsee Conference, where they decided or they planned the last solution. The most irrational move in the history was planned in a total rational way. I can see Paula here. We argued about several things and then we agreed. I look at my students. They had a kind of a conference every week. We called it Melia. They can argue which kind of shirt they have to learn, which logo they will put on. They can argue all night. When we look at parliaments, a law that has to be passed, there will be someone else that will give a comment. When we sit around the table with friends and we start talking about the subject, always there will be someone that will give another idea. Here, bureaucrats, army officers, policemen were called to one of the most beautiful places in Germany. It's on a big swamp. It's a castle. On the invitation, it's written, breakfast will be served. And they were discussing which kind of gas to use, which experience do we have, what's the last solution. No one said, let's maybe take the Jews and make them slaves. No one stood up and said, are you crazy? And there was no one that was shot for a different idea. And let's say someone would put in the prison. It was the most irrational meeting. In a rational way, there wasn't such a meeting in the history of humankind, where intellectuals, people that got the best education, humanities education, from the best universities, were discussing how to murder with a lot of painful and torture. That's what Goldhagen teaches us. It's not only to murder. You know, when you kill sometimes an animal that caused damage, no one will accept torturing the animal. But Goldhagen teaches us in a torturing way. That was part of the system to kill the last Jew. First phenomena, Judenrein. The second phenomena, no one stood. The most irrational thing in the rational way. But then I go to the third phenomena. And the third phenomena, when Ben Shlomo used to say it on his first time, I was shocked. I couldn't accept it. He used to say the Germans that had murdered the Jews weren't criminals. I think that every one of us had read a book or had seen at least one movie or series about criminals in jails. You see that some people are evil. They were born evil. We call it in Hebrew, Afrat Ishiyut, maniacs. They can do evil things. Even in Syria, 6-7 years ago, when Daesh attacked Syrians and beheaded people, in the beginning, Assad, that himself is evil, he released murderers from jails in order to fight against ISIS, because he said a normal soldier in the Syrian army won't be able to fight in the same tools of ISIS. But these people were professors, teachers, physicians. They had families. Even when you go to the diary of the commander of the Auschwitz camp, concentration camp, he writes a diary every day. He describes one day the way he goes to see how the system works, and he sees the naked woman in front of the crematorium holding her 2 babies, and all of them are screaming and crying because they understand what's going to happen to them. And he writes there, their crying had touched my soul. I remembered my kids that are playing now in the yard. It touched me. So I've put my hand into the pocket of my coat. I took 2 sweets out, gave every baby one, and then moved them into the crematorium and closed the door. They always claimed that they have morals and ethics that they have to keep. But they killed willingly every Jew, torturing. The pictures that we see of this German, everyone knows it, that he shoots this mother that is holding her baby. Every German would say to shoot a baby is a bad thing. because we have ethics. You know, in the book of Gold again, he tries to do a research about one of the heads of one of the companies, Captain Wolfhagen. He's a reserve soldier. You know, we try to understand, okay, these young people that were motivated by Hitler. No, the young ones were on the front line on Barbarossa mission. They were in Rommel in the Middle East fighting. The reserve ones came afterwards, and the company of Wolfhagen, they had a mission to burn Jews in 20 synagogues, 20 villages. They were planning, they were organizing, there were anyone that said, I don't want to go to this killing that day. Even when one day Wolfhagen brings his fiancée to see what he's doing and how important it is and why he's not returning home, there was a discussion in the company that it can't be that such a woman, a German woman, will see such things. But Wolfhagen, when he is demanded from his commander that every evening, when he gives order to the soldiers to remind the soldiers not to take food from Polish people, he refuses, and he writes a letter to the headquarters that he will refuse. He says, do you suspect that a German soldier with our ethics and morals will steal food from the Polish people? But if a child will be thrown out of the window of the burning synagogue, you know, in the Wild West, when someone would be hung to death and suddenly the rope would be turned, even then they wouldn't kill him. They would say, wow, God saved him. He would kill the baby immediately. And there were hundreds of them. You know, many times it's natural. It's to go to the idea of Auschwitz and Majdanek and Treblinka, because there we can imagine a machine with a very specific number of people that are doing this evilness. But 50% of the Jews weren't murdered in Auschwitz and Treblinka and Majdanek. They were murdered in these trucks that you had to load and unload the Jews, in the pits that they were shot to death, in the synagogues and schools and orphanary houses that they were burned to death, and hundreds of people had surrounded and brought them inside in order that no Jews will escape. First phenomena, Judenrein. Second phenomena is the irrational thing that was done on the most rational way and no one stood up. The third one, that they weren't criminals, they were regular people. The fourth phenomena that Ben Shlomo describes, there were no martyrs in the Holocaust. We call it in Hebrew, there was no Kiddush Hashem in the Shoah. You know what are martyrs? Martyrs is when you have alternative. You can betray. You know, we know the martyrs in Spain. You could convert into Christianity and live, or you could keep your belief and then you would be burned to death. The majority had converted. The death was too frightening. But there were the ones that would keep their trust. You have an alternative. In a war, you can surrender, you can betray, you can become a spy. Even when you were the most evil Judenrat, you were the most evil Apo, you would be a Jew that converted before to Christianity. You would be a Jew. Some Jews were part of the Nazi party in the beginning. Even then, in the end, they killed you. You can be a Muslim that taking the bodies out of the crematorium. In the end, they would kill you too. This phenomena, first time in history that you have no alternative. You know, on that moment, I understand that Ben Shlomo told us, never judge a Jew. As long as he calls himself a Jew, you have to respect him. Because the trauma of 1,900 years of a diaspora having no state and the only one message, survive, 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 that it was a mistaken. Because when you call the research, you understand until the last second, they said the Russians will come first, it will stop. We won't sell all of our wealth and escape. They will starve us, but in the end, they won't kill us. You mustn't judge as Jew, because to be every one of us is a kind of a Holocaust survivor. To understand that we are so alone. First phenomena, Juden Rein. Second phenomena, the most irrational thing in a rational way, no one stands. Third phenomena, they weren't criminals. Fourth phenomena, they weren't martyrs. We had no alternative. You know, when yesterday I read to my kids again the story of the Struma ship. Remember the Struma? 700 Jews. They got to the Bosphorus, they got to Turkey, and the Turks asked the British, allow us, send them into Israel, 700. And Lord Moon said, no, 700 Jews will unstabilize what's going on there. And they were drowned to death. Only one survived. Where could they go, the Jews? Fifth phenomena, where the Germans were acting against their own interest. The most important historian of the Holocaust is Ian Kershaw. He tries to figure out in his book about the end, the acts of the Germans. Because along the history, there were few great examples of strong nations that wanted to take control on the whole world. And they started a war and they conquered, succeed, but then they understood they went above their abilities, but they understood it in the right time and they stopped. And they got into kind of an agreement that sometimes or had brought them back to the first proportion or even kept some of their achievements. The Barbarossa missions failed on the beginning of 1943. On the beginning of 1944, the German generals are screaming, begging for armory, for weapons, for supplies, for things. Our soldiers are dying. When we look at the way that the Germans on 1944 decides to kill 800 Hungarian Jews, hundreds of thousands of Germans had to work. They didn't have trains, but they would take their trains in order to kill more and more Jews. From the beginning of the Holocaust, when the Germans had thrown out the scientists, some of these scientists that got to the United States and were part of the groups that had created the nuclear weapons. Imagine they would be left in Germany. Einstein wouldn't calibrate with the Germans, but some of these scientists would calibrate. And imagine if the Germans would achieve the nuclear weapon, we wouldn't be talking now here today, because they would kill the last Jew in the world. They would do it because they worked to do it and they were close to do it. But from sending the scientists away, from the mania of killing the Jews, and in that Ian Kershaw was wrong, and I wrote him a letter about it, and later on he publishes another book about the 10 big lessons from the Holocaust, and there he admits that most probably the Germans had a bigger interest on killing Jews than winning the war, and that's a phenomenon, because that's pure evilness. To kill 1.5 million kids, explain. You know, many of us, when we want to understand what happened on the 7th of October, and we said the Hamas are like Nazis, they're not like German Nazis, because they don't want to kill every Jew in the world. They want to take us out of Israel. They want us to return to the times that Jews were in the 19th, 18th, 17th century. They want to murder the man and take our women. They want even to take some of the kids and convert them as Muslims. They even, in their planning, Haaretz had published, they said some of the Jews in certain positions, we will want to keep them in order to be a strong country of our own. They wanted Juden Rein, the last Jew in the world. They would agree even to go against their own interests. And then I have the sixth phenomena that Ben Shlomo didn't tell it to me. But when I went my first time in my life, when I was 41, maybe 40, to Auschwitz, I was a deputy of the Minister of Education. And one of my positions, I was in charge on all of the trips to Auschwitz. Before that, I never felt that I have any need to go to Auschwitz in order to understand the Holocaust. But then I was in charge, so I had to go there. And I served in a unit named Maglan. And one of our abilities is working with jets, striking, very. And I get to Auschwitz and I see these huge crematoriums. And I understand that Auschwitz is not only a concentration and a killing camp, but endless companies of Volkswagen, of Mercedes, of Siemens on a huge, huge land. And there I hear how the United States, England, they strike the industry. And there wasn't even one pilot that would release one bomb on one crematorium to stop, on one train. When I learned the story of Roja Robota, this brave woman with her assistants, the way she smuggles gunpowder slowly, slowly, until they explode one of the crematoriums. And there I understood how lowly we were there, that no one really cared for the Jews as a nation. Individuals, like my father, were saved from different reasons. But no one cared for us. No one in the world. And that's a phenomenon. You know, because when the church had demanded to stop murdering the gypsies, and they didn't count gypsies outside Germany, even when they asked them to stop murdering retarded kids, they didn't look for retarded kids in Poland or in Netherlands like they looked for Anna Frank. They stopped. No one stood for us. And we're alone. And then the question is, what do we do from then? So Shalom Rosenberg, like I started in the beginning, said, it's a question that we have to raise. Pure evilness defines the Jews as their enemy. But my teacher, Professor Ben Shlomo, the nickname they used to call him the Jewish Socrates. Every time he returned from Oxford and Harvard, in each one of the places he had a chair for Spinoza, for his expertise. One time when he returns from Oxford, I had the privilege to collect him from the airport. And the first thing he wanted me to do, and every time traditionally he had done it, to take him from the airport to Latrun or to another army base. He used to go to a tank, touch the tank and kiss his hand. And he said, as long as we will have tanks, the Jews will be saved. He used to read us a letter of a hero that had fought on uniting Jerusalem on the 6-Day War and was killed there, a kibbutznik, Ofer Fenninger, that said, we have to be strong, brave Jews forever. Yehudim chazakim vegeim, very strong, very proud. What happened to us on the last 30 years, we allowed ourselves to minimize the Israeli army, to say that the world now is rational and there is a world morals and world ethics. And what we understand specifically on this year and on Holocaust Day, we can't compromise on Jewish strengths. We will have to rebuild the Israeli army. The Israeli army on 1985 was the biggest army you could imagine, with brigades and divisions and battalions, endless. And then, yeah, it's true. America had a plan how to convince Israel that we don't need such a big army. They worked on it very well. Their biggest calibrator was Ehud Barak. Yeah, for certain reasons, he helped, because he is the second most powerful politician in Israel after Bibi Netanyahu. On his way, and his way, he knows how to break and put watches, and the Israeli army, all of us, we can only look at the mirror. We were mistaken. And in this Holocaust day, we have to know. And you know, just now, at least another 4 soldiers were killed in Kerem Shalom. It doesn't matter what we will do. We will have to fight back several years until the world will understand from generation to generation. And there is another thing. The denial of the Holocaust, it's not only because of people that are evil, because it's such an irrational thing to understand. So it's a kind of a human being need to deny the Holocaust. My teacher in 1996, Ben Shlomo, used to say it will take 50 years. It's already happening now. But our privilege that there are still Holocaust survivors that are living among us. And it is so important that us and the young generation will go and meet them. Because we will be now in a certain time that on the next 10 years, the denial of the Holocaust will be so loudly until we rebuild our strength. But then there will be a generation that will say, I met these people. You won't tell me. And because of the Holocaust, we Jews, we got confused a bit. We won't get confused anymore. So thank you for listening. I will love to get afterwards personal comments. How was it in English? I tried to give it with no paper directly, the way it's built in my mind. And if there is even, you know, it's now almost 6:30, and I want to go and give respect to my father. My kids will be there. A lot of people will come to listen to him. He's old. And now when my eldest son, Jonathan, told his commander that he's not returning today until he listens to his grandfather, his commander said, I do agree because you don't know if your grandfather will live next year. And it is important that you as a soldier will listen to him and then return back because we have to get prepared to fight in Rafah. So we are fighters. We will return being fighters. Toda Rabba Shir. And thank you all. And thank you, Paula. Without Paula, we wouldn't get to this group. I always remember. And let's have meaningful time. Toda.
Thank you.